Dr. Q. I'd like to also thank the organizer, Agora Society, for inviting me to speak today. In fact, Agora was the first society to ask me to speak after the MACC controversy broke. And I couldn't say no to them. I want to congratulate them for putting this back on the drawing board. This is an issue we need to discuss. Now, I wanted to connect MACC controversy to larger issues. Corruption, which is a real pandemic in this country. It's out of control in this country. And I also want to link it to the issue of the financing of politics. Now, let's go to the context. When the MACC controversy broke, I expected that the Prime Minister, Ismail Sabri, would act decisively. In fact, his refusal to act on the controversy is an issue of grave concern. There's been no action really taken on the MACC incident that transpired at the beginning of this year. I am not at liberty to speak about that event because there's now a court case, and I don't want to make that the central issue. That is not the central issue. That is the context in which we begin this discussion on where we are today. What happened? First, the Prime Minister refuses to act decisively on this, and then we hear that the Cabinet said they discussed the pros and cons of this issue. I must say that I was rather flabbergasted to hear this word, pros and cons. This is not an issue about the pros and cons. This is the question about doing the right thing. The right thing is that there is a major controversy involving the head of MACC. What is the government going to do about it? And what has the government done so far? And soon after that event, we had the Transparency International, the 2021 index, which came out and showed that we had fallen, and fallen badly by 5 places. That itself raises another red flag. And again, what was the response to this incident with regards to what happened with the Transparency International index? We haven't heard any discussion from the government in terms of how they're going to remedy this situation. In fact, the minister, Wan Junaidi, made a statement questioning even the veracity of the index, which I found to be shocking. And to throw into the box, the melting pot, we have the Pandora's Papers. And the Pandora's Papers again exposed a whole group of very prominent politicians. Daim Zainuddin, recently listed as probably the richest man in Malaysia. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, the current president of UMNO, the current finance minister of this country was also mentioned. What has happened so far? And let me remind you that the Prime Minister said, we are going to be very strict about corruption. We are not going to protect anyone. Well, we are still waiting for the action from the Prime Minister. These issues raise the question, where is the political will to curb corruption? Why is there no political will to curb corruption? Now, here's the tragedy. This is not a new issue. This is an issue going back many years. So what I'm going to do today, and what we decided when we were organizing this forum, and I had a discussion with the organizers, I said, the problem with many Malaysians is, one, they don't read, and second, they don't know their history. The knowledge that we Malaysians have of our history is not good on this issue. To show you the severity of the problem that we are confronted with. So let me now take you to what we're going to do. I'm going to take you through history. I'm going to identify the issues that have brought us to this very bad state that we are now in. And then we will talk about how we are going to move forward. The time has come to mount a campaign to stop corruption in this country, which is out of control to my mind. So let me start. Let's go back in history. I know this is very wordy. It takes you, it's a very busy slide, but this is our history. It goes back to 1981. Prior to 1981, when we talked about politics and money, there was talk about UMNO having a secret fund. Books have been, there have been literature on it about a secret fund which they use to fund general and state elections. The money for the elections, where did it come from? It used to come from the tycoons from the MCA. MCA was a party of tycoons. But for me, the defining moment, and this is where I really want to get into, is about money politics within the party. UMNO. And the defining moment, the first defining moment was 1981. In 1981, we saw the beginning of the practice of the use of money during UMNO elections. And it started at the General Assembly. It happened again in 1984. And then it happened again in 1987. In 1987, we had the very famous Team A versus Team B. We are very fortunate to have Tunku Razak here, who can speak about these issues. Team A versus Team B. Here now we are beginning to see the escalation of the politicization, the monetization of politics. It was also at this time, you will remember, that we had a whole slew of scandals. We had the BFM scandal. We had the Maminco scandal. There were a whole range of scandals already by that time. There was also the politics of giving out contracts, privatization. Who were the beneficiaries of these privatized contracts? The politics of patronage became very strong, and that led to a battle, Team A versus Team B. The policies were not being implemented well. And soon after that, we saw the next sequence of events. UMNO was disbanded. We then see the rise of UMNO Baru. The judiciary is taken to task, and we saw the dismantling of the judiciary. The media was brought down. And in 1987, November, 106 people were arrested under the ISA. One of the darkest moments in our history. That's when democracy, to my mind, really died. The night democracy died. And that's when, since then, the problems began to get worse. Mahathir changed the rules in UMNO Baru. Now, if you want to win the elections, it's not about winning at the General Assembly. You've got to get the votes from the grassroots. That means you have to have money to win support from the grassroots to take on the top leaders. He changed the rules. He made it very difficult for people to mount a challenge. The second issue, which he also facilitated, was the rise of politicians in business. The desire to get politicians to move, to get Bumiputras to move into business led to the move of politicians themselves in business. Prior to this, it was all about UMNO in business. UMNO as a party owned many businesses. They owned NST, they owned hotels, for example. They were very active in construction. And then we saw the rise of what we call crony capitalism. The next defining moment was 1993. Anwar Ibrahim, finance minister, wants to become the deputy prime minister of Malaysia. Although he was told not to do it, he ran. He took on Ghaffar Baba. And at that point, we see money coming in from people who have received contracts into UMNO. That money is then taken down to the grassroots. And then we see the deep monetization of UMNO. The cancer at the top had now spread to the bottom. The word cancer was Mahathir's word. Mahathir used this word cancer to describe the spread of politics, as he put it, in the body politic of UMNO. And in that Wawasan team, we had the likes of Najib Razak, Muhyiddin. These were members of the Wawasan team. And now a person who has now left politics, Mohamad, the chief minister of Selangor. These were the people who became the people who talked about a new language, New Malay, Melayu Baru, Koprat Melayu. That was the language. Mahathir, in fact, said, greed is good. Go into business. The neoliberal system, America, join the stock market, become conglomerates, become global players. All that came to a stop in 1997. In 1997, we had the Asian financial crisis, and then in 1998, we had the conflict between Mahathir versus Anwar. Personalized politics. Anwar is then removed from the system. And then Mahathir does something else. He makes himself finance minister. That was the next stage. Now the prime minister is also the exchequer. The concentration of power in the office of the prime minister. He also controls the finance ministry. I'm moving very quickly in the history, but this history is very important to show you the system that is being created in politics. A system was being created. The system became clearer when Abdullah took charge. Abdullah, when he came, he said, I'm going to change the system. It's infested with corruption and cronyism. I'm going to be a prime minister for all. I'm a prime minister, I remember, with big ears, he said. I will listen to everyone. There was a sense of euphoria. Change had finally come. But Abdullah did not deliver. In fact, a whole new breed of well-connected businessmen emerged under Abdullah. And then we have the defining election, 2008. 2008 was the real defining election. It was in that election, UMNO did very badly, lost their two-thirds majority, lost 5 state governments. Abdullah couldn't believe what had happened, given that he had swept the elections previously, the previous election. This was supposed to be a time when we talked about change. Why? Because not only were we confronted with a political crisis, in 2008 we were also confronted with a global financial crisis, which brought Malaysia to its knees. A double whammy. Politics in a mess, finally elections bringing about some change, hope for change, and in the economy, there was no two ways about it. We had to reform. And then came Najib Razak. And Najib spoke about reforms. He talked about the government transformation plan. He said we need a new economic model. He talked about the ETP, the economic transformation plan. Every day you open the newspaper, there was a new idea. It was a time when we thought, okay, some changes are going to happen. He even made controversial statements. No more affirmative action because it contributes to patronage. These are Najib's words. There was a sense of feeling that change may be imminent. When Najib came to power, he had already numerous allegations of scandals behind him. He was not a very popular choice. When the poll was taken as to his popularity, it was only about 30%. Soon after he came to power, he announced a range of reforms. After 1 year, a popularity poll was taken, it had shot up to 70%. Such was the desire for change. He himself, and Abdullah said it when he spoke, when Abdullah handed over power, he said, we have to stop money politics. It is undermining UMNO. UMNO lost badly because of money politics. Najib himself proposed a reform on political financing, to reform political financing. And then he quickly changed. Within a quick span of time, he said no more privatization, affirmative action became market-friendly affirmative action, and all talk about reforming money politics went out the window. What brought about this change? Why did he change? Because Najib suddenly realized he was sitting on a gold mine. He was sitting on a world called the GLC world, which gave him enormous power. And remember this, like Mahathir, Najib was also the finance minister, as well as the prime minister. In 2013, he went into election promising so many things. He thought he could win that election and win it big. And to his horror, he lost big. 2013 was a shock for him. It was also interesting that he lost badly because 2013 was an election. I know I went to every state. I went to every state in the general election. I visited every state. And what shocked me in this general election was the volume of money that was being spent on the ground. Never before in my research of politics in this country, visiting constituencies during a general election, never before had I seen this kind of money. And politicians were talking about it too, opposition. They were talking about it too. They were saying, where is all this money coming from? No one knew. And then 2 years later, in 2015, we found out. The 1MDB scandal broke. And Najib confirmed it. The money that was used in the 2013 election came from 1MDB. A massive volume of foreign funds from the Middle East was now part of our political system. And it was not just the Middle East. Hong Kong, we heard through Hong Kong, money had flowed into Sabah. Musa Aman, court case there too on this. a lot of money was coming from abroad into Malaysian politics. Money politics had gone international. This was the crisis. This was a moment of crisis. But what was also interesting at that time was the GLC world. 1MDB exposed that GLC world, that shadow economy, that shadow corporate sector that was so pervasive. We wrote a book on this, my team and I. It's called Minister of Finance Incorporated, because we said it's not just 1MDB. There's a huge world out there of many GLCs, which is where the politicians were getting their money from. When they exposed 1MDB, Najib said, I'm going to form a special committee to introduce reforms for money politics, political financing. I'm going to introduce Political Financing Act. But he said, while I introduce the reforms for the financing of politics, it will be a law, I'll introduce a law, but I will not introduce institutional reforms. You can have a law, but I'm going to keep the institutions under my control. What is the point of having a law if the institutions have no autonomy? Anyway, there was a proposal for the law. Meanwhile, NGOs had come together to come up with their own proposals. Let me remind you again, in 2008, when Najib came to power and he said, we're going to stop money politics, NGOs came together, led by Transparency International, and they came up with a book on the reform of politics. A 20-point memorandum was given to the government to reform money politics. There was no acceptance of this from Najib. There was no acceptance of this even from the opposition. Even the opposition said no, because as they put it to us, we have control now of 4 or 5 state governments. We are also now getting funding. So there was no support. In 2008, when we first started this campaign on reforming the financing of politics, there was no support. And it ended. It ended very quickly. Again, it happened after 1MDB. Again, the NGOs came together. The government had its own recommendations, which was given. NGOs came together, and again they gave even more detailed recommendations on what the law should look like. And guess what happened? No takers from the opposition side as well as from the government side. What was going on here? How badly had money politics now infested the entire political system to the point that no political party was willing to support this? That was where we were at that time. And then the government fell. 2018, a new Malaysia. And in the manifesto, Pakatan said very clearly they're going to reform money politics. They said, we're going to introduce an act. Well, they had 2 years to do it, and we didn't see it. What took so long? After all the recommendations were there. The law, as from what I heard, was nearly ready. It's just a matter of taking it to Parliament and making it law. And if you don't reform money politics, you're going to get corruption. That was the point. But they refused to listen. That's our history. Yeah? That's our history that I'm putting to you today. You must know this history to understand why today we are in the mess that we are in today. And then Pakatan fell. Promised much, delivered little, and we had a new party in power. And since then, what have we seen? Okay, we had the court cases. Najib, the court cluster as they are called, Najib, Adnan, Zahid. Okay, there was some court cases, very good, action was taken. The court cases were an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener. The volume of money, donations they were called, the volume of money that were given to politicians that had seeped into the political system was stupendous. Tunku Adnan in court said, 2 million is pocket change to me. I'm quoting him. He said it. 2 million is pocket change. What kind of money are we talking about? Go and read the court cases. C4 did a study on politics of donations and foundations, where we have listed this. The volume of money was stupendous. And here I'm not even talking about the 2.6 billion ringgit that went into the accounts of politicians, which was used in the 2018 election. And what happened since then? The collapse of the system, a dysfunctional political system, party hopping, individuals hopping from one party to another, and then we see parties hopping from one coalition to another. It was bad enough that politicians are hopping, now we have parties hopping. And coalition after coalition is being formed, to the point we can't keep track of these politicians and what they are doing. So today, let me move on quickly. I've given you all your history, a quick history of over 40 years. Books have been written on this. Please read those books to come up to speed, to understand our history so that we know how to move forward. You cannot move forward unless you know your history. Let's look at today. We have a governance crisis. The worst of two worlds, as I call it. The world of Mahathir Mohamad and the world of Najib Razak. Mahathir, when he came to power, he started the politics of patronage. Najib took it to another level. Najib's administration was characterized by serious corruption. We even finally got the word kleptocracy, to our great embarrassment. Throughout the world, we were known as a kleptocracy. Kleptocracy means you plunder from the state and you take the money and you put it elsewhere, outside the country. Allegations of money laundering. Mahathir, while we may argue that he had patronage in his blood which drove his politics, he also had a developmental idea. He wanted to industrialize Malaysia. He wanted to pick winners. And he picked some winners. Halim Saad, Tajuddin Ramli, Samshuddin Abu Hassan. They were known as Dimes boys. They were groomed by Dimes Zainuddin. They didn't go far. Much of the assets from UMNO were allegedly also transferred to these people. And they collapsed after 1997. But there was another group of people who also got concessions from the government who did well with them. YTL with the IPPP, the power generation plants, did well. Ananda Krishnan did very well with Maxis and Astro. Started from scratch. Look at Astro and Maxis. Developmental. On Najib's side, however, we have the infamous Jolo. Speculative. Making silly movies, buying yachts and property all over the world. Nothing productive. So there's this talk about developmental corruption and degenerative corruption, the difference between the two. Do they both still prevail in the country? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Both types of corruption still prevail in the country. The thing has gone off. Okay, it's back. Mahathir loved the corporate sector. Mahathir and Dime loved the corporate sector. Never before in our history had we seen a prime minister who was so enamored by business. And they indulged very much in the corporate sector. These crony capitalists that came up were key players in the corporate sector. Najib, on the other hand, was not interested. The use of foreign firms, getting money from abroad, using foreign mechanisms to raise funds, and then bringing it back into the country. And in terms of money, the money went into UMNO's accounts. There was an UMNO account held by the president, the deputy president, the secretary general, and the treasurer. And then we have money, in Najib's case, going into his personal account. You're seeing differences. Do these two systems prevail? Yes, everything that I'm describing to you still prevails. In terms of ownership of firms, Mahathir didn't mind. Let it be widely held. There were many cronies. There's a whole list of them. We can go through the list. I've published a list of these cronies that emerged during that period. And it was not just Mahathir. Other politicians who came up also had their own list. But for Najib, he was more interested in GLCs. Because as finance minister, he controlled the GLCs. He controlled the GLICs. Minister of Finance Incorporated, the pension fund, which was implicated in the 1MDB scandal. He controlled Khazanah. He controlled EPF. He controlled Tabung Haji. These were all under his control. Many of them were implicated in scandals. I'll show you more later. The other issue which we must talk about, linking corporate politics with public policies. Mahathir had an agenda, BCIC, Bumiputra Commercial and Industrial Community, create a new breed of Bumiputra business people. That was his vision. He talked about heavy industrialization, Proton, the vendor system to create SMEs owned by Bumiputras. That was his vision. Privatization, use privatization to create these conglomerates. When it comes to Najib, there was no such link. You could see no link between corporate politics and public policies. So we see two systems in play by two different prime ministers, created by them, but still remaining part of the system. Today, what do we have? Politicians in business. We have politicians in business. We have cronyism. We have rent-seeking. We have corruption, created during Mahathir's time, festering until today. Now, what do we have? How is this manifesting itself? The enormous use of money during federal and state elections. If those of you had gone to Johor, you probably have seen that too. But forget Johor. Look at the last general election. How much money was used in the last general election? Mahathir used the word, cash is king. Remember? Cash is king. Where is all this money coming from? So, let me show you. Where is all this money coming from? Here you are. I kept saying GLC, GLC. This is the GLC world controlled by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister under Najib. So here you see, at the center you have the Minister of Finance Incorporated, and here I call just the big four, ministries in business, Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister's Department, the Ministry of Rural Development. Ministry of Rural Development is very important because through the Ministry of Rural Development you can reach the grassroots. The gerrymandering and the malapportionment is so bad that if you want to win the elections, you just get the rural constituencies, you win the elections. Enough. How do you control them? The Ministry of Rural Development. And always the Ministry of Rural Development is held by a senior minister, a senior UMNO minister. This was the world. In purple is all the companies they created. You can see here Mara, you can see Felda, you can see Petronas, all under his control. All implicated in scandals. You all remember the Felda scandal, you all remember the Mara scandal. And was Tabung Haji abused? Was KWAP abused? There, all here. All controlled ultimately by the Minister of Finance, who is also the Prime Minister. Mahathir called this the monster. During the last campaign, he referred to this as the monster. And we must reform this system. What happened when Pakatan came to power? Was the system reformed? Was there any talk about this? After all, it was Mahathir who said, this is a monster which is causing all the contribution and the cash is king. There, this is where the cash is coming from. Do you know all the people sitting as directors in all those purple nodes, those are companies, get a stipend, get a salary as directors? How much money is being wasted? And that money is not all going into their pocket. That money also goes into the political system. And that exacerbates corruption, rent-seeking. And what did Muhyiddin say when he became Prime Minister? He said, we got to get people to hop. How do we get them to do it? Give them GLC directorships. Didn't he say that? I'm just quoting him. Give them GLC directorships. And when he created the largest cabinet we have seen, for those who didn't get cabinet appointments, he made them chairman or senior directors of all these GLCs, for which they were getting additional income at a time when we were confronted with a pandemic and having no income. Where was the political will to reform this? Now you know how corruption became so bad. Meanwhile, what was the opposition doing? Why didn't they do anything? So let me tell you why. Penang, DAP. DAP controls Penang. They have a GLC system in Penang too. We have published this, it's out there, you can see it for yourself. The report is out. So here at the heart of it, you see Chief Minister Incorporated, holding company. Like at federal level, we have Minister of Finance Incorporated. Here we have Chief Minister Incorporated, with the Chief Minister controlling that holding company, which controls the system. Same system. Selangor, PKR. Same system. Smaller. Politicians also as directors. This is 2017, before the election. But there you are. Do they want to change it? They don't want to change it. Why should they change it? This is also a source of revenue for them. Their directors are politicians too. And let's move on. Kelantan, PAS. PAS too has it. This is our mapping of Kelantan. Menteri Besar Incorporated at the center. And the nodes at in the circles are politicians who are all directors, who are all earning a stipend. This is our system. This is the point. Let me stress this. In 2018, when we had the general election, we had 13 state governments. 8 different parties controlled the 13 state governments. That means 8 different parties had control over a GLC system at the state level. Were they willing to give it up? Why do you think there is no political will to stop this? Now you know. Now you know. So what are we going to do now? The reasons for reforms. Now I'm taking you to where we are today. Money is a key feature of our political system. I'm sorry, that's it. How can money be a key feature of our political system? It's about policies, values, principles. It's about eradicating poverty, industrialization, bringing about greater equality, not money. And look at the volume of money, the monetization of money, it has just grown. Money is seeping into the political system. I mentioned the court cluster. Look at the volume of money there. Our political culture today is characterized by vote buying, party hopping, rent seeking. That's our political culture. Are we proud of this political culture? The second issue, unequal access. It's bad enough we have that, but the way the money is distributed is unequal. Some have more than others. And that is so clearly manifested in general and state elections. You saw recently in Johor, Muda was complaining they have no money. They can't compete. New parties want to come in, they can't compete. Also, there's this issue of within the party. Do you know how difficult it is for young people to climb the UMNO hierarchy? UMNO is a party of warlords. The warlords control the entire political system at the grassroots level. You want to challenge, you want to move up, you want to become a division head, a branch leader, a division head, you have to spend a lot of money. And you don't have the money. How many young people are there in UMNO today? Why is it young people cannot move up? They cannot challenge the warlords. Everything I'm saying, we have Tunku Razale to verify or disprove. That's why I'm happy Tunku Razale is here. You don't have to take my word for it. I accept the fact I may be wrong. After all, I'm not an UMNO member. I don't know the system. I'm not an actor. That's why I am grateful Tunku Razale is here. We can have a dialogue about this. Today, before I came, I opened the news and I saw UMNO Youth. They were saying they want to introduce the Political Financing Act. What is this? UMNO Youth, Women's Wing, is it? Who said they want Political Financing Act immediately. Why? Because the young are disenfranchised. The young are marginalized. They have no place. Hard to climb unless you have money. And my sincere hope is the young don't get corrupted by money politics. Then we are all doomed. The third issue, which I want to get into, is covert funding. I showed you all the GLC system. When we came up with the book, Minister of Finance Incorporated, the book was given to Mahathir. It was given to opposition party members. I thought during the campaign they'll take the book and go to town along with 1MDB, but nobody discussed the book. Nobody. Why did we do all this work? We thought we did a great service to the nation by coming out with that book. But it was not discussed, even though Mahathir called the system a monster. Why? Now you know. Because at the state level too, they were doing it. They can be exposed at the state level too. Which brings me to the next point. Legislation. We don't have the legislation. You saw the cases in court. How did they get off? Donations. There's no law to prevent politicians from getting donations. That itself was a red flag that we have to change the law. Because the judges, whatever it is, must follow the law. What is stipulated in the law. A good defense? Maybe, but that's the case now. Donations, it's true. Politicians can get donations. And that's why, as I said, with C4, we did another study called Foundations and Donations. That's the way in which they get the money. The law must be changed. Then we have the issue of institutions devoid of autonomy. How autonomous are our institutions? How autonomous is the EC? How autonomous is the MACC, the SC? Have they devolved power to these institutions to give them that autonomy so that they can act without fear or favor? No. They're all controlled by the executive arm of the government. How can the executive arm of the government control these institutions? Already he's controlling the economy. The executive arm of government is controlling the economy through the GLC system. They're also controlling the institutions which are the regulators. The cabinet is so powerful. That is our system, which they do not want to change. And then we have money politics within the party. Factionalism. Serious factionalism in all parties. In all parties. I'm not saying that it's only UMNO. All parties have serious factionalism. Look at PKR. Serious factionalism there too. And don't tell me there's no factionalism in DAP or PAS. So, money, the key feature. If factionalism is caused by differences of opinion on policies, that's okay, you know. That's okay. But if factionalism is caused because of differences on money and access to money, then that's a problem. So this brings me to my last point, the key issues today.
Sorry, 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm done. This is my last slide. What are our problems? We started off with patronage. We moved into corruption. Patronage was legitimized by the policy. There is a policy, the new economic policy allows for the practice of patronage where you can give contracts because the policy stipulates that to rectify social injustices. That's okay. But when it's abuse of power, then you get corruption. When it goes to the cartels, when it goes to the well-connected, then it's abuse of power. And we got that. That's why we got crony capitalism. And then from there we got kleptocracy. That's even worse. Now it's really bad. Money is, before at least swirling around in the country, some projects do get done. The money gets back into the system. But kleptocracy means the money is taken out of the system and sent abroad and you never see it again. A complete waste of the money, and it is in no way contributing in any way to economic development in the country. And today we are back to patronage. The patronage system is back in play in this country. Second, the big problem, no political will to eradicate corruption. I thought with the MACC scandal, if the MACC already has these allegations against it, surely the politicians must act. Surely the Prime Minister now must say, enough is enough, he just got to do something. But no. Now you know why. Corruption implicates practically, from what I can see, all parties. There's a few parties who, of course, are out of the system, they're not part of the power. But look at how all parties seem to be implicated in this. MACC, it's under question. Something must be done to inspire public confidence if you are really to act against corruption. And what about the other institutions? Securities Commission, Bank Negara, police. The previous IGP has already raised questions about the police. That's also now in the news. And now we have a new problem. Businessmen are entering politics. Powerful businessmen are entering politics, what we call checkbook politics. Bintulu, Jalao, Semangat, Bukit Gantang. I'm just naming 4 constituencies run by prominent business people, still in business or formerly in business. These are just 4. How many more prominent business tycoons are going to enter into our political system as politicians? Is it happening in Muda? Social response. Given this crisis, what do? We have to do it. It has to be NGOs. It has to be society. If we do not stand up now and say enough is enough and put the pressure on the politicians, starting with the Prime Minister, to bring about the reforms, this is going to kill our economy. We are seeing the worst of 2 worlds now coming together, being implicated in terms of how it is functioning in our economy. And this is not good, considering that we have a pandemic to deal with. And at the heart of the pandemic, as the Finance Minister Tunku Zafrul said, when the pandemic first broke, how are you going to save the economy? He said, I'm going to use the government ecosystem. What did he mean? I'm going to use the GLCs. The banks, moratorium on loans. Tenaga, cut down on the rates for electricity supply. Telecommunications, cut down the rates so that you all can use your internet even more, which we needed to do. We're all stuck at home. The GLC can be a wonderful tool to save the economy if they use it properly, as they already showed they can, but they continue to abuse it. So what are our key demands? First, introduce the Political Financing Act immediately, as soon as possible. Stop dilly-dallying on this. The act is ready. If we do not have the PFA, the Political Financing Act, be prepared. We cannot move to solve corruption issues. There are 2 very closely interconnected issues. Start with the PFA, then we move to start moving with anti-corruption activities. All parties must disclose their sources of financing. All of them must disclose their funding. If we have reached that point, where are you getting this money? And this I'm saying not only annually, but also specifically before federal and state elections. And this issue of revolving door refers to the phenomenon of businessmen coming into politics, then going back into business, the revolving door phenomenon. And then we have this issue of secret funds. Ban secret funds, donations, expose this nonsense about donations, put a stop to this, bring it out into the light. Foreign funding, what are we going to do with it? I say no to foreign funding. I don't want any foreign funding. And stop cash payments. During elections, what did they do? They give out cash. Make that illegal. All payments must be digital anyway. Everything's digital now anyway. These are just some, just to get us going, to talk, to begin the talk. A lot more is required. And I can tell you the work has already been done in terms of what needs to be done. But there is no political will by any of the politicians that we have at the federal or state level to fight for this campaign to eradicate corruption in this country. That's why we now have to step in. The NGOs have to act together to bring an end to this money politics that is totally embedded now in our political system. Thank you.
Thank you very much.